Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I've got a question for you. How long have you felt this incredibly specific ambient sense of cultural stagnation? Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating insight from a deeply speculative essay by writer Michael Crabtree, titled The Other Side of December. It's a profound exploration of reality, time, and the actual structural nature of our modern world that attempts to put into words a mystery, well, that we've all been living through. Let's start by validating a creeping sensation you've likely had recently. Have you noticed how time feels like it's just accelerating at breakneck speed, with more news and more content constantly washing over us? And yet, our culture feels more like an endless remix than something genuinely new. We were promised a future of flying cars and entirely unprecedented ways of living. But what did we get? Just a slightly faster smartphone and a new scrolling app every year. Crabtree argues that this isn't an accident. The experience of the present has literally stopped containing a trajectory toward the unprecedented. The future, in a very real, structural sense, just stopped arriving. So we're going to deeply examine the idea that this feeling, what the essay perfectly terms ambient frustration, isn't just cheap nostalgia for the good old days. It's not just you getting older and being grumpy about new music. Look at the absolute fatigue of seeing Hollywood reboot the exact same franchises over and over, or that hollow feeling of doom scrolling through recycled memes. According to the author, this is a structural reality of the world we currently inhabit. We're living in a perpetual now, where the present simply points sideways. It just expands on existing things, rather than opening up entirely new, uncharted doors. Now, the author makes a highly radical claim to explain why this is happening, and I'm going to echo his direct request to you. I ask you to hold your dismissal and just try on this reality transfer thought experiment with me. I know, it might sound like science fiction or some glitch in the matrix internet conspiracy, but we are not talking about magic, and we definitely aren't talking about Mayan calendar prophecies here. We're taking a serious philosophical and structural look at the ultimate carrying capacity of human culture. Section 1. The Reality Transfer Theory. According to the essay, reality systems possess something called a carrying capacity. Now, this isn't a physical limit on matter or data, but a strict limit on the supply of genuine possibility. The theory argues that our primary reality literally ran out of the capacity to generate completely new, unprecedented possibilities. Think of it like your computer's RAM. When a computer runs out of active, creative memory, what does it do? It starts offloading data to a much slower, more stable hard drive just to keep the system from crashing. To prevent a total cultural collapse, everything about our world was transferred to a stable backup drive, what Crabtree calls a contingency substrate. The argument here is that we were collectively offloaded into this secondary backup reality right around the winter solstice of 2012. And this brilliantly illustrates the fundamental difference between where humanity used to be and where we are right now. We used to live in a generative space. That space birthed entirely new mediums. Think of the staggering leap from radio to television, or the invention of the concept of a guitar. But now, post-transfer, we live in a recombinant space. This backup space is highly functional, it's incredibly stable, but it can only combine and extend existing content. It's literally the difference between inventing the guitar and playing a cover song. It's built for the infinite scroll of TikTok trends. Sure, we can still write an extraordinary, heartbreaking novel, but the underlying structure means we cannot create a genuinely new category of storytelling ever again. Section 2. The 2007 Warning Signs. So a massive transfer like this doesn't just happen instantly overnight in 2012. We have to rewind to the transitional period to really see the substrate shifting under our feet. Crabtree points to the window around 2007 as the exact moment the primary substrate began its heavy offload. Let's walk through this timeline because it highlights crucial historical markers as symptoms of a reality under incredible strain. In 2007, we didn't just get the invention of the modern smartphone. We got the architecture for the pull-to-refresh infinite scroll. That is the exact digital architecture required to endlessly cycle recombinant content without ever actually reaching a true conclusion. Let's look at the 2008 financial crash through this exact same lens. Crabtree claims that standard explanations like corporate greed and regulatory failure, while entirely true, don't cover the profound specificity of the failure. He suggests the crash happened because incredibly complex economic instruments, the algorithms and derivatives predicting endless, unprecedented growth, were mathematically calibrated to a generative reality that was fundamentally closing down. The models failed because they assumed the world was still expanding, but the math violently broke when the world shifted to a closed container. The map stopped matching the land because the land itself was being transformed. Furthermore, look closely at the culture from that exact same window of time. The explosive creative era from 2006 to 2008, the peak of early, chaotic, Wild West YouTube, the finale of The Sopranos, the dawn of prestige TV, wasn't just a random boom. The essay argues this was actually the primary reality's final, desperate surge of genuine generation before the offload began. It was like a star expanding super brightly, creating uncomfortable, beautiful, edge-of-something masterpieces right before it collapsed under its own weight into the stable, infinite recombinant space we know today. Section 3, Life in Recombinant Space. The essay introduces a brilliant concept called the compression effect to explain why modern time feels so incredibly dense and strange. Think about a beautiful piece of music. A song is really only a song because of the latency, the deliberate rests and silences between the notes. If you compress all the notes together with absolutely no open space, you just get a deafening wall of noise. Time feels denser now because we still have all the events, the unending news cycle, the massive tidal wave of content, but we've structurally lost the latency. The open spaces that used to hold the possibility of the unprecedented are just gone. Events simply press up against each other in a continuous, exhausting stream of the already known. The crucial point here is understanding the deep psychological toll this takes on those of us who actually remember the old world. This drives so much of modern millennial and Gen X angst. The contingency space we live in was designed to conceal itself, to keep us stable. But we arrived carrying heavy, residual expectations from a generative space. We keep knocking, expecting a door to open into a bright new future. But the door never opens. And the real tragedy isn't that we're failing to turn the knob. It's that in this new reality, that door is just painted on the wall as part of the transferred scenery. And this reveals a deeply fascinating generational divide. Pre-2012 generations suffer from a constant grading mismatch, an ambient frustration because our inherited expectations deeply clash with structural reality. But look at Gen Alpha, children born after 2012. Watch how effortlessly they interact with iPads and algorithmic feeds. They're perfectly adapted native to the contingency space. They don't feel bothered by a lack of newness because the remix is their native language. They don't feel the walls of the container, and they don't miss the open fields simply because they were born in the beautiful infinite room. Section 4, Embracing the Container. So is this all just incredibly depressing? Well, actually, no. The essay turns a vital corner right here, and we need to look at the surprisingly uplifting resolution Crabtree offers. First, we have to honestly accept what we've lost. We've lost the genuinely unprecedented, the massive cultural shifts that create entirely new categories of human existence. But look at what we still have. This recombinant container is unbelievably vast. Just because we aren't inventing new colors doesn't mean we can't paint absolute masterpieces. We still have enormous space for high-velocity creativity, for profound meaning, for deeply resonant human connection, and amazing personal achievement. The contingency substrate is not a prison. It is just a bounded envelope. The essay concludes with this really beautiful thought. Once we stop fighting the structural walls, once we stop agonizing over politics or blaming artists or exhausting ourselves trying to force a future that is structurally never going to arrive, we can finally let go. And letting go of that expectation is incredibly liberating. We can finally find peace. We can start moving through this enormous space with the care, the attention, and the creativity it deserves. We aren't trapped. We're simply learning to live in a room. Which leaves us with a profound takeaway for you to carry into the rest of your day. If we truly are in this secondary recombinant reality, fighting the walls is a total waste of your energy. The question isn't how to break out, but rather, how do you plan to create meaning, beauty, and connection inside your room? Think about how you will decorate your space inside the container the next time you find yourself navigating the infinite scroll. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the spaces you're in.